Hello and welcome to another episode of Reason at Large. I'm Craig Biddle. Today I want to answer a question from Beth, who asks, what are the relationships of and the differences between altruism and second-handedness? Now, the main difference between these two is that altruism is a moral theory or a theory of morality, and second-handedness is a psychological disposition or a psychological malady. So they're in different categories in that respect. But there definitely are some interesting relationships between the two. So let's look at each and we'll see what those are. Altruism is the moral theory that holds that being good, being moral, consists in self-sacrificially serving others. So it's the idea that you should serve others and you should do so in a way that is self-sacrificial, so in a way that renders you a net loss in the action. If you act in a way that serves others but provides you a net gain, for instance, let's say you sell people computers at a profit. So you're serving others, but you're rendering yourself a net gain in the transaction. That would be an egoistic action. So that's not what altruism calls for. Altruism calls for self-sacrificial service to others, and that's the general idea. Now, so in practice, an example would be, suppose a young adult is trying to decide what career to choose, and he really wants to be a musician or an artist or a businessman. And that's what he really wants to do, but he's accepted altruism as the proper morality, so he says to himself, well, that's what I want to do, but what would be really a way to serve others sacrificially? So he considers being either a social worker or maybe a teacher or a doctor, not because he wants to be one of these, but precisely because he doesn't want to do this. So it would be self-sacrificial to go in this direction, but it would be serving other people. So it would have the two aspects that altruism requires: service to others in a self-sacrificial way. So that's what altruism basically is, and that's the kind of thing that altruism basically calls for. Second-handedness is a psychological disposition, and it's basically the condition of lacking sufficient self-esteem or courage to think for yourself and make your own judgments. So a second-hander turns to other people to see what he should think, what he should believe, what he should value. And the classic example of this is the emperor's new clothes. You're probably familiar with the story. The idea is that the emperor allegedly has some new clothing that these clothers have created for him, and only people of perfect virtue can see the clothing and see all of its beauty. So the emperor comes out and he's stark naked, but everyone in the audience who has heard that if you have perfect virtue can you see the emperor's clothing, is oohing and eyeing about how beautiful his new robes are and everything, and trying to make it look like they are men of virtue. And a child in the audience screams out, "The emperor is naked!" So you get the idea. Everyone is basically being second-handed. Everyone is sort of deferring to what they think others want them to say, rather than saying what they actually see to be the case. And that's a classic example. But we see this kind of mentality all the time. Unfortunately, we see it in people who defer to their group of friends who take some position on something, and a person might know that the position is wrong. He might see the evidence himself that his friends are wrong on this, but he opts to go along with the group anyway because he wants to be liked, or he wants to be seen in a favorable light with the group. And he just lacks the conviction that his mind is capable of identifying the facts and of making rational judgments himself. So he doesn't. So you can think of it this way: an altruist sacrifices sacrifices values for others because he thinks he should, and a second-hander sacrifices his judgment to others because he lacks the self-confidence or the self-esteem to think for himself. And that's basically the difference between the two. Now, I think you can be one or the other of these without being both. So you can be an altruist and not be a second-hander. I don't think it's common, but it can happen. Someone can accept the idea that altruism is a true morality by accepting the package deals that are all over the place to this effect. So a lot of people hear that, well, altruism means sacrificing for others, which means being nice to people and being and having a good goodwill towards strangers and the like. So what's packaged together is benevolence and self-sacrifice, as if they're the same thing. But a lot of people accept that idea, and then that's bolstered by other package deals like self-interest and selfishness are the same thing as predation. So they mean stabbing people in the back to get what you want. And with those kinds of package deals floating through the culture, it's quite possible that someone might accept altruism, at least for a while in his life, simply on mistaken grounds. And so he's not necessarily being a second-hander. He's not deferring to other people, because he doesn't have self-confidence. He's just simply mistaken based on some package deals that he has innocently accepted. And I also think that a person can be a second-hander without being an altruist. It is possible to lack self-esteem and not necessarily have adopted the morality of altruism. You can, from various decisions and experiences in life, your self-esteem can be low, and or maybe just be temporarily low, and you might defer to others, sort of. In your thinking, without really realizing that you're doing it, again, I don't think this happens a lot. I don't think there's a lot of innocence in this, but it can happen. And I also think that it's quite common that people are both. Obviously, if you're a second-hander, if you're deferring to others about what's true and what you should value and what judgments you should accept, then you're going to, when it comes to asking and answering the question, well, what's the proper morality to accept, you're going to turn to others and say, well, what's the popular morality? What are all the cool kids accepting? So you're going to end up being an altruist, because that's the pervasively accepted morality in the culture today. So I think we see a lot of that. And I think it's also the case that if someone really accepts altruism, and if the idea is that you're supposed to sacrifice your values to other people, well, what could be a greater value than your mind, than the judgment of your own mind, your own ability to think? So if you're really supposed to sacrifice for other people, then sacrificing your judgment to the judgment of others follows suit. So there are definitely relationships between the two, and I think that very frequently people who are one of these two things are both altruists and second-handers. But it's possible that they can be separate, and in any event, they're very unfortunate situations. The ideal, of course, is to be an egoist and to be a first-hander or an independent thinker, and they go hand in hand. An independent thinker wants reasons. He wants evidence in support of the ideas that he accepts. And egoism is supported by all sorts of evidence. The only reason that we need values or a moral code in life is because we want to live and pursue our goals and achieve happiness. That's what those are the facts that give rise to the need of values and of a morality. So an egoist is someone who accepts the idea that he should always act in his own best interest, and that he's the proper beneficiary of the things that he produces, and that everyone else has that same situation too. So egoism entails the idea that we should respect the rights of others to pursue their values and so on. And an egoist, because he recognizes that he should always act on his best judgment and pursue his values, holds his mind, his fundamental means of identifying reality and of pursuing values, as very important. So he's not going to sacrifice his judgment to other people. He's going to be an independent thinker ultimately, or he'll train himself over time to be, even if he's not when he comes to egoism. And vice versa. I think an independent thinker is going to end up accepting egoism over time if he looks into, well, what are the facts that give rise to the need of a moral code. So they're different things, and they're related in certain interesting respects. That was an excellent question, and I hope that clears some of that up. That's it for today's episode of Reason at Large. If you have a question you'd like me to answer in a future episode, email it to me at cbiddle@theobjectivestandard.com. For more commentary from an objectivist perspective, visit our website, theobjectivestandard.com, where you'll find TOS Blog, our daily commentary, and our quarterly journal, The Objective Standard, which is a subscription-only journal, so it's behind a paywall, but the subscriptions are very inexpensive. They start at $29 a year, and that gives you not only access to the current issue and the next year's worth, but also to all the back issue content, which is a solid 9 years of great articles and book reviews and movie reviews and interviews, all from an objectivist perspective. That's it for today. Until next time, pursue your values, reject contradictions, and love your life.